So hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is V. For today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys and telling you guys how I write an introduction. So essentially, I'm going to be showing you guys how to create something of this length and size, about 300 words in about 20 minutes. Just a little bit of background. I have been writing essays at university every single week since I started. I used to have 2 essays a week. So in my first year, second year, I would typically have 2 essays a week because I'd be learning 2 modules at the same time, side by side. So in total, you'd end up with 12 essays in 8 weeks. And they were 2,500 words each, which was a lot, obviously. And that was the reality. And I was just so used to it. Every single week, I would be handling 2 essays at the same time. And obviously, both of those essays needed introduction. So I've been writing introductions. Now, in my 3rd and final year at the University of Oxford, I only have 1 essay a week, which is absolutely magical. I've only been writing 1 introduction a week this term. Moving on. So the first thing that I'd recommend you do when you have an essay due and you've got to write your introduction quite quickly and like get it done. First of all, before I begin to tell you like the tips and tricks on here, I always try to advise that you plan in advance. If you've been given 5 days like I do, I always have 5 days or 6 days to write the essay. I try to read for at least 3 or 4 of those days and then plan and write in the last day. So I would advise, if you do have like 3 weeks until your work is due, try to actually spend 2 weeks doing the reading or whatever, of solid reading, in depth, making notes, and then when it comes to writing that intro, you will blast through it so quick because the information is in your mind. It just comes out of your fingertips. Do you know what I mean? So the first thing that I'd recommend you do when you get a question, take the essay question and break it down, and this essentially becomes your introduction in a sense, because introductions are a way of you presenting the argument that you're about to argue and laying it out so that the reader knows where you're going to go with it and what kind of topics you're going to cover. So for last week's essay, I was told I had to assess how fundamental a challenge did early Christian ideas about sex and gender pose to the Roman status quo. Now, the first thing that I would think about with this is, what do they mean by the Roman status quo? So what was the Roman status quo? So what was it? So this is going to branch off and I'll start to think about, what do they think about things like homosexuality, pederasty, marriage, virginity, adultery. Basically, all I'm doing is breaking down what the Roman status quo could be about various things like sex and gender. So I would want to make sure I explore what the Romans thought about each of these different categories, right? So, and then the question says, how fundamental a challenge? So now it's asking me to engage and debate whether there was a challenge. So for us to understand whether there was a challenge or not, I need to understand what the Christians thought about this for me to check if there was a challenge. So I would go here into my plan and break down what Christian ideas were. So the first step of your essay question is understanding the question and breaking it down, because this essentially is going to be your introduction, because this is how the examiner or the person marking your work wants to know, did you fully understand the question and are you going to explore all aspects of that question? So then we've got our plan for our introduction essentially, because this is what I use, and this turns into that bad boy over there. And we've just done that. We've just planned, broken down our question, understood what's needed, and essentially that is your introduction. And you want to map out the problem, which we've just done. We've mapped it out. We've understood what's the fundamental teachings of Christianity, what was the Roman status quo, how is it a challenge, and if it wasn't a challenge, why? If it was a challenge, what did the Romans do about that challenge? And just a whole mismatch of ideas. Now, when it comes to actually writing the work, I swear by this resource. I use this for all of my essays. I'm going to use it for my dissertation. I've been using it in my exams, like or how to actually start a paragraph. You might have all the ideas in your head, but you don't know how to actually articulate it. And the University of Manchester's phrase bank book is everything. Okay, so you want to go onto Google and type in Manchester Phrase Bank, right? So the Manchester Phrase Bank is essentially your Lord and Savior for when you are at university. I'm telling you, this is how I write my introductions so well, and I kind of don't even look at it anymore because I've been using it for so long. It's kind of ingrained in my brain, kind of. So you come on here and it essentially has everything from how to introduce work, and it gives you the ways to, like, literally it gives you the answers. So if you are, let's turn up the brightness of this. So if you are I don't know, identifying controversy within a field, it tells you the various ways, and it's not plagiarism because these are just openers. It just gives you all of these like gems on how to introduce your work depending on what you're trying to do. So for me, look, I'd be using this: establishing the importance of a topic as a problem to be addressed. I would start with something like, X is a major problem in, X impacts negatively upon a range of, and it just gives you various, you guys need to explore this thought of, and it just makes your work sound a lot more neater, concise, put together, you know. Describing methods, reporting results, discussing findings, writing conclusions. It also helps with that. So now you know how I would make my rough plan, which is going to be the words that I'll use in my introduction. You know what kind of like language I'll use because of the phrase bank book. So all of this stuff is going on in my head before I even begin typing. Before, when I've still got 0 words and there's 1 minute on the clock, this is all already going on in my head. So when I do start, it's like I'm very, very, very prepared. So of course I'm going to be able to write that introduction in 20 minutes and make it a good one. So yeah, if you can define the terms in your introduction, I'd recommend you do that as well. With introductions, try and keep them short and sweet and just get straight to the point and like map out your argument. I know that my introductions are normally like 300 words, which might be like a lot to some people, but to me, if you're writing a 2,500 word essay, you're going to be covering a lot of ground. You want to make sure your introduction does that as well. So I think 300 words to 400 words for an introduction for an essay so big is reasonable. But if I was doing like a 1,000 word one, I would probably write 200 words. If it was like a 500 word thing, I'd probably write 100 words. So alter it to what you've been given, but keep it short, sweet, to the point. Boom, boom, boom. Show that person who's marking your work, I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to cover this and you're going to love it, and this is my argument, this is where I stand, and let's go. And yeah, that's about it. That's how I go about writing my introduction. Now I'm going to read you my introduction from last week, and then we'll be done, because obviously I can't give advice and then not show what I did. Anyways, this is what I wrote about how fundamentally challenged early Christian ideas about sex and gender post the Roman status quo. We see that the Roman status quo norms and cultural values were challenged by the rise of Christianity during the imperial period. The early Christian ideas called for a change of lifestyle and social standards in the daily lives of Roman people in order of adhering to the new religious code under the Christian Church. In Rome, ideas about things such as sexual morality were dictated by the laws, traditions, and societal norms of Roman values. Notions such as sex outside of the marriage were reserved for the men, meanwhile the women were confined to the boundaries within their marriage. We see that the ideas of sexual gender inequality in a marriage were not condoned in the Christian teachings declared by St. Paul in his letters to the Corinthians. He notes that once married, the bodies of each partner now belonged equally to the body of their other halves, challenging the Roman status quo. The idea that it would be far easier for a camel to pass through the eye of the needle than a rich man to enter heaven places the values of the elites on its head. For their rite of passage through life and access to privileges had been through wealth and monetary advantage. They gained political favours, social status, and power through their wealth. The fundamental teachings of early Christian ideas showed that wealth could not buy their way into the kingdom of heaven, fundamentally altering the Roman status quo of acquiring positions. Also, we see that the notion of sexual liberation and expression of desire for both men and women were also put into question by the early Christian teachings. They challenged the morals of those living in the Roman Empire, showing that things such as sex were reserved for procreation or marriage rather than pursued simply for the desire's sake. Thus, in this body of work, I'm going to argue that the early Christian writings did in fact pose a fundamental challenge to the Roman status quo about ideas such as that of sex and gender. It was quite a lengthy introduction, and looking back, I could have cut a few things here and there and maybe written it differently, but that's what I wrote in about 20 minutes. My tutor was happy with it. She said I addressed all of the critical arguments I was going to argue, and that it flowed with the rest of the work that I did in the paragraphs and the conclusion. So obviously reading it alone is a bit like, ooh, but then when you read it with the whole essay, it fits, trust me. So yeah, that is it guys, that is it, and I'm gonna go now because I feel like this video has been very long, but that is how I write my introductions. It starts off with a little plan, breaking it down using my own brain. Then I go to the academic phrase bank book from Manchester University and like look at the different ways I can actually like put these ideas into action. Then I just start writing and I tweak it at the end, and yeah, that is it. I don't know if that was helpful or not, but I hope it was. Have a lovely rest of your weekend and comment down below if this was helpful, and I'll be seeing ya. Good luck.